My husband laughed into his camera, joking that he would trade me for a hot cryptocurrency tip. The party went silent when our reclusive neighbor slammed a black briefcase onto the table and declared the deal accepted. I assumed it was a twisted prank until I discovered a life insurance policy worth $3 million recently signed in my name. My husband had not been joking. My name is Mallory, and at 34 years old, I had become an expert at spotting forgeries. As an art appraiser, I looked for hairline cracks in oil paint or inconsistencies in a brushstroke. But as I arranged the organic appetizers on a marble platter in my backyard, the biggest forgery I was currently ignoring was my life in Emerald Hills. The air here always smelled of freshly cut grass and desperation. Kieran was already on his third artisan cocktail, his phone held aloft like a holy relic. As a sales director for Vertex Systems, my husband treated every moment of our existence as content for his followers. He adjusted his ring light, flashing that bright, veneered smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Babe, smile. We are live in 5, 4... He trailed off, winking at the lens. I forced a smile, the kind that made my jaw ache. Across the street, the heavy velvet curtains of the house opposite ours twitched. Elias Thorne lived there. He was a ghost in a neighborhood of peacocks. He had moved in 2 months ago, driving a beat-up sedan that clashed with the fleet of leased luxury SUVs lining the curb. He rarely spoke, and his eyes always seemed to be dissecting you, looking for weak points. By 8 o'clock, the patio was packed with neighbors who laughed too loud and drank too much. Kieran was holding court by the grill, his face flushed with gin and adrenaline. He was talking about cryptocurrency again, a volatile new coin that he claimed was going to make him a god at Vertex Systems. I am telling you guys, the return on investment is insane, Kieran shouted at his phone, slurring slightly. He grabbed my waist, pulling me into the frame roughly. I would literally trade this beautiful woman right here for a solid entry position. Serious offers only. DM me. The crowd erupted into performative laughter. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach, humiliation burning my cheeks. I tried to pull away, but his grip was iron. Then the laughter died. It did not fade. It was severed. Elias Thorne stepped out of the shadows of the hedges. He wore a dark jacket that looked too heavy for the warm evening. He walked straight to the patio table, ignoring the guests who parted like water, and dropped a black leather briefcase onto the ceramic tiles. It landed with a heavy final thud. The silence was absolute. The crickets seemed to stop chirping. Deal accepted, Elias said. His voice was a low rumble, devoid of any humor. He looked at Kieran, then shifted his gaze to me. She is my collateral starting from midnight. Kieran's face went the color of ash. For a second, I saw pure, unadulterated terror in his eyes. Then, the salesman mask snapped back into place. He let out a loud, braying laugh that sounded like glass breaking. Oh, man, you guys. Elias here is really committed to the bit, Kieran stammered, looking around wildly for validation. Method acting, I love it. The guests chuckled nervously, the tension dissipating but leaving a sour taste in the air. Elias did not smile. He held my gaze for a terrifying second, a look that was not a threat, but a warning. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing back into the dark, leaving the briefcase behind. Kieran snatched the case off the table before I could touch it. I will just put this prop away, he muttered, rushing inside. When the last guest finally stumbled out at 11 o'clock, I cornered Kieran in the kitchen. He was aggressively scrubbing a clean counter, refusing to look at me. What the hell was that? Kieran, I demanded, my hands shaking. What did you promise him? He spun around, his eyes bloodshot. God. Mallory, you are so embarrassing. It was a joke. Can you not take a joke? You are acting paranoid and hysterical. He left a briefcase. Kieran, it is empty. It is a gag gift, he shouted, then stormed upstairs. I am going to bed. Do not wake me up with your drama." I waited. I waited until the house settled and the rhythm of his snoring echoed from the master bedroom. It was 2 in the morning when I crept down the stairs, guided only by the moonlight filtering through the high windows. A sliver of light bled from under the basement door. I moved silently, my bare feet making no sound on the hardwood. I peered through the crack in the door frame. Kieran was sitting on an old crate, the black briefcase open on his lap. It was not empty. There was no money inside, either. It was filled with a thick stack of documents. I watched as he flipped through the pages, his hands trembling violently. He pulled out a pen and signed something at the bottom of a page that had a red, urgent stamp on it. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, rocking back and forth. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning swept over me. That was not a joke. Elias Thorne was not a comedian. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. That briefcase was not a prop. It was a receipt. And I was the merchandise. The morning sun hit the kitchen island, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but the warmth did not reach me. Kieran was pacing the length of the living room, his thumb flying over his phone screen with a manic intensity. Every time the floorboard creaked under my weight, he flinched. He refused to look me in the eye, focusing instead on a spot somewhere above my left ear. "Do you want eggs?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He jumped as if I had fired a pistol. "No, no food. I have to go early. Big meeting." He was out the door before I could finish pouring my coffee. The silence he left behind was heavy and suffocating. I drove to the private art gallery where I worked, but the serene landscapes and abstract sculptures felt mocking today. My mind kept replaying the image of that black briefcase hitting the table. Around noon, I logged into our joint bank account to pay the electric bill. My breath hitched in my throat. The balance, which should have been healthy enough to cover our mortgage and savings, was near zero. A withdrawal of $50,000 had been made at 4 in the morning. The transaction description simply read, "Trust investment." I called Kieran immediately. Straight to voicemail. Panic began to curdle into anger. I left work early, driving not to my house, but to the one across the street. I needed to talk to Elias Thorne. I needed to tell him that whatever twisted game he and my husband were playing, I was done being the punchline. I marched up his driveway and pounded on the heavy oak door. "Open up, Elias," I shouted. "I know you are in there." Silence. The house loomed over me, dark and imposing despite the afternoon sun. I knew he was home. His beat-up sedan was in the driveway. Frustrated, I walked around to the side of the house, hoping to find a back entrance or a doorbell that actually worked. The curtains in the side room were drawn, but there was a small gap where the fabric did not quite meet the sill. I leaned in, squinting against the glare. My heart stopped. Elias was sitting at a metal table in what looked like a dining room stripped of all furniture. He was not laughing. He was not on a computer. He was methodically wiping down the components of a disassembled sniper rifle with an oil rag. But it was not the weapon that made me stifle a scream. It was the wall behind him. It was covered in photographs. Photographs of Kieran. Kieran leaving the gym. Kieran at the grocery store. Kieran at the party last night. I stumbled back, my boots crunching on the gravel, and ran back to my house, locking the door behind me. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my keys. Kieran came home an hour later. He went straight to the shower without saying a word. As soon as I heard the water running, I slipped into his home office. His laptop was open on the desk. I sat down, my fingers hovering over the trackpad. His email was open. The top message was from a sender named Only Null. I clicked it. The text was brief and chilling. "Deadline is tomorrow. Either the money transfers or we take the collateral." Collateral. The word echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of my skull. She is my collateral. Elias had said that. What do you think you are doing? I spun around. Kieran was standing in the doorway, a towel wrapped around his waist, water dripping onto the hardwood. His face was twisted into a snarl I had never seen in our 7 years of marriage. He lunged forward and snatched the laptop from the desk, slamming the lid shut. "Kieran, what is that?" I whispered, backing away until my hips hit the edge of the desk. "Who is Null? What did you do?" He ignored me, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he aggressively typed in a new password. He looked up, his eyes cold and dead. "Stay out of my business. Mallory, you do not understand how this works. Just shut up and let me handle it." He was a stranger. The man I loved was gone, replaced by this cornered animal. I realized then that my life was no longer my own. It was currency. I waited until he went back into the bathroom to finish dressing. I moved with mechanical precision. I packed a small suitcase for Leo, my 6-year-old daughter, when I picked her up from school. I forced a bright, cheerful tone into my voice. "Mommy has to go on a boring business trip," I told her, buckling her into the car seat. "And Daddy has a big project. So you are going to have a sleepover at Grandma's house for a few days. Won't that be fun?" "Yay cookies," she cheered. As I drove her away from Emerald Hills, I looked in the rearview mirror. Our house looked perfect and pristine from the outside. But I knew now that it was built on a foundation of lies, and the demolition had already begun. I was not going to sit around and wait for the bullet to find me. After dropping Leo off at my mother's house, I drove straight to a frantic, neon-lit internet cafe in the city center to meet Veda. We had gone to college together, but while I studied brushstrokes, Veda studied code. She was the only person I knew who could look into the digital abyss without blinking. I slid my phone and laptop across the sticky table. "Find everything," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Please." Veda plugged in a series of cables, her fingers dancing across her mechanical keyboard. After 10 minutes of silence, she spun her laptop around. Her face was grim. "He owns you digitally." "Mal," Veda said, pointing at a map on the screen. "There is a tracker on your phone, one on your car, and a keylogger on your laptop. He sees every keystroke you make. But that is not the worst part." She pulled up a complex diagram of shell companies. Vertex Systems. It is fake. It is a laundering front for offshore gambling rings. And your husband looks like he lost a shipment of digital coin about a month ago. He is in the hole. Big time. My stomach churned. "How much enough to get him killed?" Veda replied bluntly. "Or enough to make him desperate." We saw Kieran's signal moving on the map. He was heading to the industrial district. I left Veda and followed the blinking dot to an abandoned parking lot near the docks. I parked 2 blocks away and crept through the shadows of rusted shipping containers until I saw his car. He was standing under a flickering halogen light, pacing. A sleek, silver luxury sedan pulled up, the tires crunching on the broken glass. A woman stepped out. She was tall, wearing a white trench coat that looked impossibly clean against the grime of the lot. This was Zara. I recognized her from the society pages, a venture capitalist with a reputation for ruthlessness. I crouched behind a concrete barrier, pulling out my phone to record audio. I just need a few more days." "Zara," Kieran pleaded, his hands wringing together. "The policy. It takes time to process the paperwork. We do not have days." "Kieran." Zara's voice was smooth and cold like polished steel. "You lost $5 million of our client's money. You offered a solution. We accepted. Do not get cold feet now." "But she is my wife." Kieran's voice cracked. "I mean, is there no other way I can sell the house? The house is mortgaged to the hilt," Zara snapped, stepping closer. "You gave us the collateral. The insurance policy on Mallory is worth $3 million. That covers the principal. The rest we will take from your future earnings." I clapped a hand over my mouth to stifle a sob. The wind bit at my face, But the cold coming from my husband was worse. He had not been joking at the barbecue. He had been announcing my price tag. I cannot do the actual act, Kieran stammered, looking at his shoes. I cannot be the one who— Coward! Zara spat. We anticipated your lack of spine. The deal has been transferred to a third party. Elias will handle the rest. He specializes in accidents. The name hit me like a physical blow. Elias, my neighbor. The man with the gun and the photos on his wall. He wasn't just a creep. He was the executioner. Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my hand, a spam call. The sound was faint, but in the dead silence of the lot, it sounded like a siren. Zara's head snapped toward my hiding spot. What was that panic surged through my veins? I scrambled backward on my hands and knees, scraping my skin against the rough asphalt. I saw a large, green dumpster a few yards away. Without thinking, I vaulted over the side and landed on a pile of wet cardboard and rotting garbage just as footsteps crunched near my previous position. I held my breath until my lungs burned. Nothing but rats, I heard Kieran say nervously. Let's just go. I waited in the filth for 20 minutes after their cars drove away. When I finally climbed out, I smelled of decay. I drove home, my mind racing. I walked through the front door, disheveled, my clothes stained with grease and dirt. Kieran was in the kitchen, nursing a whiskey. He looked up, his eyes widening in mock concern. My God, Mallory. What happened to you? I looked him dead in the eye, channeling every ounce of hatred I now felt into a mask of exhaustion. I fell off my bike. I lied, my voice flat. Some car ran me off the road, probably just an accident. Kieran stared at me, searching for a crack in my story. Right, an accident. You should be more careful, babe. The world is a dangerous place. I gripped the handle of the ceramic paring knife so tightly my knuckles turned white. It was a pathetic weapon against a man who cleaned sniper rifles for fun, but fear had stripped away my rationality. I was not going to wait in my house like a sitting duck. I was going to cut the head off the snake. I slipped through the hedge separating our yards, moving low to the ground. The grass was damp against my jeans. I reached his back door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. Before I could even touch the metal, the world spun violently. In less than a second, I was face down in the dirt, my arm twisted painfully behind my back, the knife lying uselessly 3 feet away, a heavy knee pressed into my spine, pinning me with the weight of a boulder. Do not scream. A voice growled in my ear. It was Elias. If you scream, you die. Do you understand? I nodded frantically against the mud. He hauled me up with terrifying ease, not letting go of my arm, and dragged me into his kitchen. He kicked the door shut and shoved me toward the wall, but instead of hitting me, he pointed a remote at a bank of monitors I had not noticed before. Look, he commanded. I gasped. On the screen was a live feed of the street in front of my house. A black sedan with tinted windows was parked 3 houses down. That is Zara's cleanup crew, Elias said, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. They are waiting for my signal. If I do not give it, they come in and do it themselves. And they are not as clean as I am. You work for them, I stammered, backing away until I hit the counter. No, I am hunting them, Elias said, tossing a badge onto the table. It was not a police badge, but a private investigator's license. I have been tracking Zara's money laundering ring for 2 years. I moved in here to get close to Kieran because his name popped up in the ledger. When he offered you up at the party, I had to intervene. If I had not claimed the contract, that man in the sedan outside would have taken you that night, and you would be in a shipping container halfway to Macau by now. I stared at him, my brain struggling to process the shift in reality. So, the briefcase, A prop to buy trust, Elias said. He walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a thick file folder. But the danger is real. Look at this. He spread photographs across the table. They were obituaries. Women of different ages, different races, but all with one thing in common: their husbands were high-risk gamblers or failed crypto investors. Zara calls it the Widowmaker Protocol, Elias explained grimly. Husband gets in debt. Zara offers to wipe the slate clean in exchange for the life insurance payout. She stages an accident. Husband gets the money, pays Zara, and keeps a cut for his silence. He pulled up a video file on his laptop. It was footage from a hidden camera, likely inside a bar. It showed Kieran, drunk and weeping, signing a document while Zara stroked his hair like a pet. I cannot go to jail. Zara! Kieran's voice from the speakers was slurred and pathetic. I cannot lose my reputation. Do whatever you have to do. Just make it quick. My heart shattered into a million jagged pieces. Hearing about it was one thing. Seeing him sign my death warrant to save his own ego was another. The man I had shared a bed with for 7 years, the father of my child, had traded me for his reputation. I sank to the floor, unable to stand. What do I do? Elias knelt beside me. His eyes were no longer cold. They were intense and urgent. We turned the tables. If you run now, they will hunt you and your daughter down. The only way out is to destroy the network. You have to go back there. You have to be the loving wife. You have to let them think the plan is in motion. You want me to live with a man who wants to kill me? I asked, my voice trembling. I will be watching every second, Elias promised. I need you to get the encryption key from his physical ledger. Once we have that, we can send Zara and Kieran to prison for the rest of their lives. Can you do this? I wiped the tears from my face. The sadness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard rage. I thought of Leo. I thought of my life insurance policy. Tell me what to do, I said. 20 minutes later, I walked back through my front door. The house smelled of garlic and rosemary. Kieran was standing by the stove, stirring a pot of marinara sauce. He turned, a glass of red wine in his hand, offering me that same perfect, practiced smile. Hey, honey, he said softly. I thought, with everything going on, I would make your favorite spaghetti bolognese. A little date night in, just us. It was the performance of a lifetime. He was cooking dinner for the woman he planned to bury. I walked over and kissed him on the cheek, feeling my skin crawl as his lips touched mine. That sounds lovely. Darling, I said, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand. I am starving. The trap was set, but this time I was not the prey. Kieran proposed the trip over pancakes on Thursday morning, his voice laced with a desperate sort of cheerfulness. He pushed a brochure across the kitchen island toward me. It was for a secluded cabin near Lake Arrowhead, a place we had not visited since our honeymoon. I was thinking, we need this. Mal, Kieran said, his eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. Just the two of us. No phones, no work. Just a weekend to heal, to get back to where we used to be. I looked at the glossy photo of the cabin, surrounded by dense woods and isolation. It was perfect for a romantic getaway, or perfect for an unsolved disappearance. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I clasped my hands together and forced a wide, eager smile. Oh, Kieran. That sounds wonderful, I exclaimed, reaching out to squeeze his hand. I have been feeling so distant from you lately. A trip is exactly what we need. He exhaled a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. Great. We leave tomorrow morning. As soon as he left for the office, I met Elias and Veda in the alley behind the local bakery. Veda worked quickly, her needle flashing as she sewed a tiny, wafer-thin transmitter into the lining of my winter coat. This creates a mesh network with the relay Elias will set up, Veda explained, snapping the thread. It records audio and broadcasts your location. Do not take this coat off. Kieran tampered with the car. I told them, my voice trembling slightly. I checked the garage this morning. There is a puddle of fluid under the rear axle. He cut the brake lines on the SUV. Elias nodded grimly. He wants it to look like a malfunction on the mountain roads. We will swap the rental car he booked with one of ours that looks identical. But you need to pretend the brakes are failing when you get near the cabin to sell the story. Later that afternoon, I stopped by Kieran's office to bring him lunch, a pretext to get near his computer. He was in a heated meeting, leaving his laptop unattended on his desk. I plugged in the flash drive Veda had given me. As the progress bar crawled across the screen, I opened his messaging app. What I found made me want to vomit. There was a thread with Zara, but it was not just business. It was intimate. They had been sleeping together for 6 months. Zara was not just a loan shark. She was his high school sweetheart. Is the package ready for delivery? Zara had texted at 9 o'clock that morning. Yes. Taking her to the lake tomorrow. I just want it to be over, Kieran had replied. Don't get soft on me. Kieran, think of the $3 million. We can finally open that vineyard in Tuscany. Just you and me. No more baggage. I was baggage. 7 years of marriage. A beautiful daughter. A life built together all reduced to baggage worth $3 million. I stared at the screen, tears pricking my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I ejected the drive just as the door handle turned. Mallory Kieran stood in the doorway, looking startled. What are you doing here? I jumped up, masking my fury with a pout. I just wanted to surprise you with a sandwich, and... I was looking at old photos of us on your desktop. Remember this one? I pointed to a generic wallpaper of a beach. Kieran relaxed, his shoulders dropping. Yeah, good times, he muttered, walking over to kiss my forehead. It took everything in me not to recoil. I love you. Mal. I love you too. I lied, burying my face in his chest so he would not see the hatred burning in my eyes. That night, I met Elias one last time by the fence. The moon was obscured by heavy clouds. Listen to me carefully, Elias whispered, handing me a small can of pepper spray to hide in my boot. Plans have changed. Zara does not trust Kieran to finish the job. She is sending a professional. They call him the cleaner. He will be at the cabin tomorrow night to make sure the accident is fatal. So I am walking into a trap with 2 killers, I whispered back. No, Elias said, his grip on my shoulder firm and reassuring. You are the bait. I am the trap. Just keep him talking. Do not let him out of your sight. I went back inside and packed my bag. I folded my clothes neatly, placing the coat with the tracker on top. I was ready. Kieran thought he was taking a lamb to the slaughter, but he had no idea he was waking a wolf. The rental car smelled of synthetic pine and stale anxiety. Kieran gripped the steering wheel with such force that his knuckles turned the color of bone. We were 3 hours into the drive, winding through the dense, fog-choked forests that surrounded Lake Arrowhead, and the silence in the car was deafening. Every few minutes, Kieran's phone would vibrate in the cup holder. He would glance at it, his eyes widening with panic, before quickly flipping it face down. Who keeps texting you on a Saturday? I asked, feigning innocence. Kieran flinched, nearly swerving into the other lane. It is just work. Just some server issues. Do not worry about it. I watched him swallow another sedative dry. It was his 3rd pill since we left the city. He was trying to numb himself for what he was about to do. I turned my head to look out the window, scanning the gray sky. High above the tree line, a small black speck hovered against the clouds. It was the drone. Elias and Veda were out there, shadowing us, their electronic eyes watching our descent into hell. We arrived at the cabin just as the sun began to bleed behind the mountains. It was a beautiful structure of timber and stone, isolated at the end of a long gravel driveway. The silence here was absolute. I pulled out my phone and checked the signal bars. None, just as Elias had predicted. No service, I said, looking at Kieran. We are completely cut off. That is the point, right? Kieran muttered, grabbing our bags from the trunk. Just us. I followed him inside. The air in the cabin was stale and frigid. As Kieran busied himself with the thermostat, my eyes swept the floor. Being an appraiser meant noticing details others missed. Near the back door, there was a faint smear of reddish mud on the hardwood. It was fresh. The lock on the back door was disengaged. Someone had been here recently, or perhaps they were still here. I am going to freshen up, I announced. I locked myself in the bathroom and turned the faucet on full blast. The rushing water created a wall of sound. I pulled the collar of my coat up to my lips, speaking into the tiny microphone Veda had sewn into the fabric. We are in, I whispered urgently. There is mud by the back door. The back entry is unlocked. I think he is already inside. A tiny burst of static buzzed in my ear, the earpiece feedback confirming receipt. When I returned to the living room, a fire was crackling in the hearth. Kieran stood by the mantel, holding 2 glasses of deep red wine. His hand shook so badly that the liquid rippled like a dark tide. To us, he said, his voice cracking. To a fresh start. I took the glass. To us. I brought the rim to my lips, but did not drink. The moment Kieran turned to throw a log onto the fire, I poured the contents of the glass into the potted fern beside the sofa. I wiped my mouth and set the empty glass down. That went to my head fast, I said, faking a yawn. I think the altitude is getting to me. I need to lie down. Kieran looked at the empty glass, relief washing over his face. He thought I was drugged. He thought the hard part was over. Go to sleep, Mallory, he said softly, almost sadly. It will all be over soon. I went upstairs to the master bedroom and climbed into the cold bed, fully clothed under the quilt. I gripped the panic button Elias had given me until the plastic dug into my palm. I lay there in the darkness, listening to the wind howl outside. Kieran did not come up. He was downstairs, waiting. An hour passed, then I heard it. It was not the sound of Kieran pacing. It was the heavy, deliberate thud of boots on the wooden porch stairs. Then the front door creaked open. These were not the footsteps of a nervous husband. They were heavy, confident, and rhythmic. The cleaner had arrived. The floorboards in the hallway creaked. It was the sound of betrayal. I watched through the slats of the louvered closet door as Kieran, the man I had promised to love until death do us part, slowly opened the bedroom door. He did not come in. He stood by the frame, pressing his back against the wall, covering his face with his hands. He was too cowardly to watch the violence he had purchased. A shadow moved past him. The cleaner was a mountain of a man, dressed in black tactical gear, moving with terrifying silence. He approached the bed where the lump under the quilt rose and fell, a rhythmic breathing motion I had simulated with a set of pillows and a strategically placed darker blanket. The blade glinted in the moonlight. He raised his arm and drove the knife down with sickening force. Thwump! Feathers exploded into the air like snow. What the killer grunted, realizing the deception. I kicked the closet door open. It slammed against the wall with a bang that made Kieran jump. Before the killer could turn fully, I unleashed a stream of pepper spray directly into his eyes. "Ugh, you witch!" he roared, clawing at his face. I did not wait. I bolted past him, sprinting into the hallway. Kieran was staring at me, his mouth gaping open like a fish out of water. He reached out a trembling hand, perhaps to stop me, perhaps to beg. "Mal, he stammered. I stopped for a split second, my eyes locking onto his. I let him see the fire that had replaced my tears. "The joke is over, Kieran!" I screamed. I slammed my hand against the hidden panic button Elias had installed on the wall paneling. A piercing siren shattered the silence of the cabin, echoing through the woods like a banshee. I took the stairs 2 at a time. Above me, the killer was recovering faster than I had hoped. I heard his heavy boots pounding the floorboards, shaking the very frame of the house. "You are dead," he bellowed from the top of the landing. I slid into the kitchen in my socks, my mind racing. I knew this house better than the people who built it. I had studied the blueprints Elias acquired. The kitchen had a fatal flaw, a narrow galley layout with a dead-end pantry that looked exactly like the exit to the mudroom in the dark. I grabbed a bottle of olive oil from the counter and smashed it on the floor near the pantry entrance, then ducked behind the heavy granite island. The killer burst into the room, his eyes streaming tears, his gun drawn now. He scanned the room, seeing the open door of the pantry and assuming I had fled that way. There is nowhere to run. He hissed, lunging forward. His boot hit the slick oil. He flailed, his heavy frame crashing into the cabinets with a bone-jarring crunch. Crash! The bay window shattered inward. Elias flew through the broken glass, rolling tactically across the floor. He was on the killer in a heartbeat. The 2 men collided with the force of freight trains. The killer was strong, but Elias was fighting for something more than a paycheck. I watched, trembling, as Elias disarmed him with a brutal wrist lock and slammed his head against the tile floor. The killer went limp. "Secure," Elias shouted, looking at me. "Are you hurt?" "No," I gasped, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Where is Kieran?" We heard the front door slam. I ran to the living room window. Kieran was sprinting across the gravel driveway toward the car, his movements erratic and desperate. He fumbled with the door handle, looking over his shoulder. Suddenly, a figure stepped out from behind the trees. It was Veda. She raised her arm, and the crackle of a taser lit up the night. 2 electrified prongs hit Kieran squarely in the chest. He convulsed and dropped to the ground like a sack of stones. I walked out onto the porch, the cold mountain air filling my lungs. Elias was behind me, dragging the unconscious killer. Veda stood over my husband, kicking his car keys out of reach. Kieran groaned, rolling onto his back. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with tears and snot. "Mal, please," he sobbed, reaching out a hand. "She made me do it. I love you. Please help me." I looked down at him. I searched my heart for any lingering spark of affection, any memory of the man I had married. I found nothing, just a vast, cold emptiness. "Save your breath, Kieran," I said, my voice as cold as the grave he had dug for me. "You are going to need it for the jury." We did not call the police immediately. That would have been too easy. And quite frankly, it would have been insufficient punishment. I wanted the architect of my misery to see her masterpiece crumble before her eyes. Veda sat on the coffee table, guarding a bound and gagged Kieran with the taser resting casually on her knee. I picked up my husband's phone. His face was swollen from crying, and he flinched when I unlocked the screen with his trembling thumb. I opened his chat with Zara and typed 3 simple words: "It is done." Her reply came 30 seconds later. "On my way. Have the paperwork ready." We waited in the dim light of the cabin. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of Cabernet, the real stuff this time, not the watered-down poison I had fed the plants. I sat in the high-backed leather armchair facing the door, crossing my legs. I felt a strange, icy calm washing over me. The terrified wife was gone. The judge had taken the bench. 40 minutes later, headlights swept across the front window. A car door slammed. Then came the click of heels on the wooden porch, confident and rhythmic. Zara did not knock. She opened the door with the entitlement of a woman who thought she owned the world and everyone in it. "Finally," she said, stepping into the foyer, a sleek silver briefcase in her hand. I hope you did not make a mess. Kieran, the coroner needs to believe it was a... Her voice died in her throat. She froze. Her eyes darted from Kieran, who was trussed up like a turkey on the floor, to Elias standing in the shadows, and finally, to me. I took a slow sip of wine, savoring the bouquet of oak and blackberry. Welcome, Zara, I said, my voice smooth. You are late for the funeral. Zara dropped the briefcase. Her hand flew to the inside of her white blazer. She was fast, but Elias was a ghost. Before her fingers could graze the handle of her pistol, he had stepped out from behind the door and pressed the cold barrel of his own weapon against the base of her skull. Do not, Elias warned, his voice a low growl. Hands where I can see them. He disarmed her efficiently, tossing her gun onto the sofa next to me. Veda kicked the back of Zara's knees, forcing her to kneel beside Kieran. It was a pathetic tableau the mastermind and the pawn, both brought low by the woman they underestimated. You have no idea who you are messing with, Zara spat, though her voice wavered. Vertex Systems will bury you. Vertex Systems, I asked with a dry laugh. I pointed the remote at the large television mounted above the fireplace. You mean this Vertex Systems? The screen flickered to life. Veda had connected Kieran's laptop. Documents, bank transfers, and incriminating emails began to scroll across the screen in high definition. Then came the audio, the recording of Kieran and Zara plotting my death in the parking lot. Coward. We anticipated your lack of spine. The deal has been transferred to a third party. Zara's face went pale. Here is the situation, I said, leaning forward. I have everything. Every washed dollar, every fake account, every accident you have arranged for the past 5 years. Now, I can hand this to the FBI and you will go to prison for life. Or, I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was agonizing. Or I upload it all to the dark web right now. I imagine the cartels and syndicates whose money you have been losing would be very interested to know exactly who is responsible. The police might arrest you. Zara. But your clients, they will skin you alive. Zara began to tremble. The arrogance evaporated, leaving behind a terrified criminal. What? What do you want? She whispered. Names, I demanded. I want the top of the pyramid. I want the people you report to. You give me the network, and I give you to the feds in one piece. She hesitated for a second, looking at Kieran, then looking at the phone in my hand where my thumb hovered over the upload button. Okay, she screamed. Okay, it is the Red Ledger Group. The accounts are in the Caymans. The contact is a man named Silas Vane. I will give you the access codes. Just do not post it. She spilled everything. For 20 minutes. Veda typed furiously, recording every confession, every name, every dirty secret Zara had kept locked away. We had dismantled a criminal empire in a living room. When she was done, Zara slumped against the floor, defeated. Kieran, whose gag had been removed, looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes. Mal, baby, please, he blubbered, snot running down his nose. She made me do it. She threatened me. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. We can fix this. I stood up and walked over to him. I looked down at the man I had spent 7 years building a life with. I remembered our wedding day. I remembered the birth of our daughter. And then I looked at the contract on the screen where he had sold me for $3 million. Slowly, I slid my diamond wedding ring off my finger. It felt heavy, burdened with lies. You did not sell me because you were threatened. Kieran, I said softly, you sold me because you are weak, and you are cheap. I threw the ring. It hit him square in the forehead and bounced onto the floor with a hollow clink. Take it, I said, turning my back on him. Maybe it will buy you a pack of cigarettes in prison. The strobe lights of the tactical vehicles cut through the mountain fog like jagged lightning. Elias had not just called the police. He had activated a federal extraction team. He was a protected witness who had gone rogue to solve a case, and now that he had the evidence, the FBI was here to clean up the mess. Agents and windbreakers swarmed the cabin. I watched from the armchair, feeling a strange detachment, as if I were watching the season finale of a show I used to love. Zara was the first to go, dragged out in handcuffs, screaming obscenities at the agents. The cleaner, groggy and battered, was carried out on a stretcher. Then came Kieran. 2 agents hauled him up from the floor. He looked small. The arrogance that had filled the room during the barbecue, the smugness of his live stream, it was all gone. He was just a man in a wrinkled sweater who had bet his life on a lie and lost. Veda tapped the laptop key. "It is done," she announced, closing the lid. The entire confession, the conspiracy, the threats. It was all live-streamed to a secure server at the district attorney's office. There will be no plea deals. There is no way to spin this. As they marched Kieran toward the door, he dug his heels into the rug. He twisted his neck, his eyes searching frantically for mine. "Mallory," he screamed, his voice raw. "Mallory, look at me. I am your husband. Do not let them take me. I can explain. I heard him. Every pathetic syllable. But I did not turn my head. I picked up my phone and dialed the only number that mattered. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice steady and warm, turning my back on the man being shoved into the back of a squad car. "Yes, everything is fine. Can you put Leo on? I want to tell her I am coming home to her." The next week was a blur of media frenzy. The story of the wife trade dominated every news cycle. Vertex systems collapsed overnight. The data I had stolen from Kieran's laptop, combined with Zara's forced confession, exposed a network of money laundering that implicated city council members and high-ranking bank officials. It was the biggest scandal the city had seen in a decade. I returned to Emerald Hills one last time to pack. The house felt like a museum of a life I no longer recognized. I saw Elias across the street. He was loading a duffel bag into a new car, not the beat-up sedan he used for cover. He walked over to me, stopping at the edge of the driveway. He looked different without the weight of the investigation on his shoulders. Lighter. "Work is done here," he said simply. "I have to move on. New assignment." "Thank you," I said, "for saving my life and for not letting me be a victim." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a plain white card. It did not have a company logo, just a name and a number printed in simple black ink. "Elias Thorne does not exist," he said, handing me the card. "This is who I really am. If you ever find another briefcase, call me." I looked at the card. Julian Vance. He nodded once, got into his car, and drove away, disappearing down the street as quietly as he had arrived. My phone buzzed. It was my lawyer. I answered, bracing myself for a fight, but his tone was jubilant. "We got it all. Mallory," he said. The judge reviewed the evidence. "Given the conspiracy to commit murder and the documented adultery with Zara, the court has granted you full, sole custody of Leo. Kieran has been stripped of all parental rights. And as for the assets..." The judge ruled that since he used marital funds to finance his criminal enterprise, the remaining equity in the house and his liquidated stock portfolio are awarded to you as restitution. I hung up the phone and looked at the house. It was just wood and stone. It was not a home anymore. It was just an asset. And I was finally solvent. It has been 6 months since the night the blue lights flashed against the cabin windows, illuminating the end of my marriage and the beginning of my life. I stood in the center of a sunlit gallery in downtown, holding a glass of sparkling water. This time, however, I was not there to appraise the value of a dead artist's work for a wealthy client. I was the curator. I was the owner. The banner above the entrance read, "Reclaimed." And for the first time in years, I did not feel like a fraud. I felt like I belonged to myself. I had sold the mausoleum in Emerald Hills 2 weeks after the trial. I could not sleep in a house where the walls whispered secrets and the neighbors were spies. The proceeds from the sale, along with the restitution the court seized from Kieran's hidden accounts, allowed me to buy a small, warm cottage near the coast. It was not grand. It did not have marble floors or a smart security system that tracked my heartbeat, but it had a garden where Leo could run without shoes, and it had a front door that I locked with my own key. That afternoon, a courier delivered a heavy package to my new address. There was no return address, but I recognized the shape immediately. It was the black leather briefcase. My heart did not race this time. My hands did not shake. I carried it into the living room and set it down on the rug. I clicked the latches open. The ominous silence that had once surrounded this object was gone. Inside, it was not filled with dirty money or insurance policies. It was stuffed to the brim with envelopes, hundreds of them, all addressed to me in Kieran's frantic, jagged handwriting. They were stamped from the state penitentiary. Please, Mal, I am sorry. Read this. I could imagine his voice, desperate and manipulative, echoing from the paper. I did not open a single envelope. I did not need to know his excuses. I did not need to hear how hard prison was for a man who had never faced a consequence in his life. I gathered the letters in the briefcase and walked to the stone fireplace. I struck a match and tossed it onto the pile of dry logs. As the flames caught, I threw the letters in, one by one. Then, I tossed the leather case on top of the pyre. I watched the leather blister and crack, curling in the heat. The smoke spiraled up the chimney, carrying the last remnants of Kieran's hold on me into the gray sky. I walked out onto the balcony, inhaling the salty air of the ocean. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, expecting a call from a vendor for the gallery. Instead, it was a text message from a number I did not have saved, but I knew exactly who it was. You did good. Partner. I smiled. A genuine, unburdened smile. Elias or Julian, or whoever he was now, was out there somewhere, balancing the scales. Mommy, look. I looked down into the garden. Leo was chasing a butterfly, her laughter ringing out like a bell, clear and bright. She was safe. She was happy. And she had a mother who would burn the world down to keep her that way. I realized then that for 7 years, I had let a man with a calculator determine my worth. I had let him put a price tag on my head. But as I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and violet, I knew the truth. I was not an asset. I was not collateral. I was the fire that survived the ice. I put the phone away and walked down the steps to join my daughter. I took her small hand in mine, and together we walked into the light, leaving the long, dark shadow of the past behind us. Finally free. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to hear your thoughts on Mallory's journey. So please comment down below and let me know where you are tuning in from so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and if you really want to support us, hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people. See you in the next one.